Before I came to Korea, I was overweight and looked like this. After coming to Korea, I look like this. Now, I'm not saying changing country made me lose all the fat, but is it all a coincidence? Korea, in fact, has the lowest obesity rate in the world, and it's not just about the food we eat. This video will show you the good, the bad, and the ugly side of Korea that keeps people skinny. Let's get into it. So why is it that Korea has the lowest obesity rate in the world? One obvious reason is the food environment. If you are a thin person and a lean and aesthetic person in the US, you're doing a great job, but you're fighting against the odds. Whereas if you live in a country where there's not much availability of processed food, you will find it easier to achieve this goal. Now, at this point, you might be saying, well, so Korea doesn't have any processed food? No, we have just as much processed food. It's super accessible and we have the best delivery systems and apps to get it to our doorstep. While that's still the case in most of the developed world, historically, Korean food especially tends to be lower in calories compared to the volume. I like to use the phrase pound for pound, lower in calories than food in the US or the UK or the Netherlands. I think so, from my experience living abroad. Korean food, despite the fact that we have lots of side dishes, a lot of the taste comes from marinated foods and spices, which are low in calories. Koreans traditionally think that fat is bad. You'll see mothers and grandmothers scraping off the layer of fat on top of Korean hot pots and soups. Because of this, Korean food tends to be lower in fat. Now, why does that make it more conducive to staying lean? Is because fat will have more calories than carbohydrates and proteins when you look at just the same amount. If you look at pancakes, if you look at French food with a lot of butter, if you look at full English breakfast and crispy bacon, we're dealing with a lot of fat and therefore very calorically dense foods. Next, for some of you that have been to Korea, you will know this. There's so many cafes. Now, I know there are a lot of cafes in Europe. I know there are a lot of cafes in the US, but you ain't seen nothing like Korea when it comes to the density of cafes per human being. There's just so many. What this actually means is that cafe going has become such a big part of Korean people's life. Now, add to this that our favorite national drink, basically, is the iced Americano. I assure you, we have it more than the Americans themselves. So iced Americano actually doesn't have any sugar in it. It's around 5, maximum, 10 calories. So it's very low calorie, and caffeine also suppresses hunger for a while. In fact, I'll often use caffeine to help me fast. If you couple this idea of a cafe explosion and cafe culture where everyone's walking to cafes and having iced Americanos, suddenly you have a pretty good setup for losing fat. In fact, I would recommend this for a lot of people that are trying to get into fasting, is to leverage caffeine. Next is because of our obsession with appearance. Now, this has been in large part created by the Korean media, Korean pop, Korean drama, Korean culture, which obsesses about the appearance. Teenagers, kids growing up are always seeing these idol girl groups with their perfect physique, perfect skin, perfectly skinny. So if we think like this person has the perfect body, everybody in Korea is going to try and adhere to that beauty standard. And these beauty standards are usually created by those pop idols and drama stars and movie stars. So what you get is a whole myriad of girls and guys who want to have that hairstyle, want to have that nose, those eyes, that physique. Now, if you compare this, for instance, to the UK where I grew up, of course, it's appearance based in many ways as well, but there's a lot more acceptance of different body types, a lot more body positivity, a lot more diversity. Even in the streets, when you grow up, what you see on TV, what you see in the movies, what gets to count as cool and beautiful. There's various different body types, right? Some people might like girls who are skinny models, but other people might like girls that look like Kim Kardashian or something. There's just a huge array. But in Korea, we tend to be very focused on this ideal, this appearance obsession. What it creates is this pressure to conform, and therefore people tend to want to stay lean. Now, how can you use this to your advantage? Of course, it can be very unhealthy if you start to think, oh my God, all that matters is my appearance. I'm not saying do that, but what you can do is care a bit more about it. A lot of people that live in Europe and they come to Korea, suddenly like their aesthetic changes a little bit. Maybe they take more care of their skin because everybody's doing it. Humans are social animals. So you gotta care about your appearance, not obsess, but care about it enough to actually start to address it. Next, I used to have a fat beard, like a full beard and long hair. And whenever I'd come to Korea, like I didn't care, right? So I was just rolling around. I didn't care if people looked at me. But like, for instance, I'll go to a department store and I'll be buying some clothes, and the person that's helping me would literally like look at me and like take like a good 30 seconds to download my face into their brain. Like they're like, this guy's speaking perfect Korean, he's Korean, but he looks, what the hell? And it's these kinds of looks that you get, which you just would not get in London, you just would not get in New York. In Korea, socially speaking, I think there's a lot of pressure to look a certain way. I mean, of course, in all the countries you have fat shaming, you have bullying growing up, but the social pressure I'm talking about is a little bit more subtle and more extreme. For example, a lot of Westerners will talk about how if they walk around with slightly more revealing clothes, they'll get a lot of like this side-eye, like judgmental looks from Koreans. But this also happens amongst Koreans. Koreans be looking at other Koreans a bit weird if the guy is a bit out of the ordinary. And I'm not necessarily trying to make a moral claim here whether this is good or whether this is bad, but it just still is the case that there's this unspoken social pressure to conform to the standard that everyone's doing. Like, why are you dressing like that? Why are you looking like that? And this of course applies to your physique as well. Next, in society, there are certain situations that encourage people to stay lean. So for example, employers generally tend to prefer people that are more attractive, right? This has been shown in studies. Customers would generally treat people that are leaner better than if they are not. This, I don't think it is necessarily good. I think this is a downside of Korean society. There's a lot of this societal pressure. And one great example of this societal pressure is, again, my European friends, when they came to Korea, they'll see like all this like cute Korean clothes, and they'll go in and they'll like try to buy stuff, and they'll be like, none of this is in my size. And my friends were not even that big, tall, whatever, but they just couldn't find stuff that were their size. Now that's kind of unthinkable if you're in the UK or in the US or France, like to go into a proper clothing store and not find sizes. You're not even tall or short, you're just an average size girl. It's quite crazy, right? But that's what it is. That's what's the case. In Korea, sometimes, not all clothing stores, but some clothing stores just won't even have the clothing size. And what is that signaling again? There's a subtle signal like, why are you not gonna fit into this? Like, change your body to fit into this rather than the clothing to fit to your body. You can now also talk about parents and grandmothers and this like older generation who don't care for political correctness, and they'll just be like, why are you so fat? Why are you so overweight? You should lose this weight. There's a lot more of this direct feedback on your physique that's considered acceptable. Whereas again, in the Western countries where I spent a lot of time, it's kind of seen as taboo. It's kind of seen as, you don't do that. You don't just tell somebody they're overweight and they should lose weight, right? It's seen as an infringement on their private life. Next, Korea has the lowest obesity rate in the world according to Google last time I checked, but it also has the lowest birth rate of any country and the highest suicide rate. Now, Korea is all glam and shiny in many ways, but what does that show? Lowest birth rate and highest suicide rate. It shows that we're a country with deep-rooted issues. One of those is extremely high stress. This could be due to the educational environment, the work environment, the social environment, the conflict between the older generation and the younger generation. There's a lot of things to dissect there, which I won't go into. But one element that impacts your physique, of course, is high stress. Now, high stress is a double-edged sword because it can make you gain weight because you can just eat when you're stressed, but it can also make you lose weight. It can take out your appetite. It can make you just lose weight because you're stressed, lose your hair. So given all the other criteria that we talked about, high stress in this situation for a lot of Koreans will lead to weight loss, will lead to inability to gain weight, inability to even get pregnant and have babies and things. What does that mean for you? If you're someone that wants to get lean, if you're someone that wants to build muscle, try to lower your stress. That's an obvious point. Try to become less affected by social and societal pressure. Of course, it's difficult, but it's something that you can train yourself to do. And those are some of the things that you can do to leverage the points that I shared in a good way. I hope this video helped you. See you in the next one.